It is the same question that we asked ourselves in January. Is it time for the Cowboys to move on from Mike McCarthy? Let's talk about it. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central, and catching up with you Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays with quick-hitting videos such as this one. It is the day after the Cowboys lost to the Detroit Lions. That was a 47-9 game that has people asking Jerry Jones, hey, are you thinking about making any coaching changes? Jerry Jones was very clear yesterday. He even asked a reporter if he thought he was an idiot because he didn't like the question, naturally. And Jerry Jones basically said, no, we are not considering any coaching changes. But tonight the question is, should the Cowboys be thinking about this? And let me tell you something, man. This conversation might be about to get significantly louder, which is why I want to get into it. And I say that because the Cowboys, after the bye week, things do not get any easier. You're going to get the San Francisco 49ers. Right now, I'm leaning towards, obviously, the Niners beating the Cowboys based on what we've seen so far. Then you get the Falcons. Winnable game, sure, but not a given. Not at all. Wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons are favored for that one, by the way. Things are going. Then you get the Eagles. Then you get the Texans, the Commanders, who are looking sharp even after a loss to the Baltimore Ravens. Those two losses, the one from Commanders and the one from the Cowboys, they were not made the same, I'll tell you that. Houston Texans, Commanders, then you get the Giants, then the Bengals, the Panthers, Bucks, and you close out with the Eagles and the Commanders. There's a very realistic scenario where the Cowboys go, 1-3 over the next 4 games? Maybe 1-5 even over the next 4 games? There is a very realistic scenario where the Cowboys' record just keeps getting worse. And I'm not predicting that will be the case, but I'm telling you, this team has some real issues. It has some real issues at the offensive line, which they might get better, but you're likely not going to see any shakeups there. You're likely just going to see Tyler Guyton come back and hopefully progress as the season goes on. Maybe you're hoping for Terrence Steele to play well again. Maybe you hope for Zach Martin to stop having bad moments, because I'm going to tell you something, even Zach Martin played a bad game versus the Lions on Sunday. So you've got those protection issues up front. You've got a quarterback and a wide receiver that cannot get on the same page even after week 6. They asked Prescott about it, and he didn't have an answer as to why this keeps happening for the two guys that had all-pro caliber seasons in 2023. So all of that is going to continue to be a problem. Micah Parsons, D-Law, they might come back, but you still had issues stopping the run, and that had a lot to do with the defensive tackles who got pushed around once again versus the Lions. Maybe they were better against the Giants. Maybe they were better against the Steelers. But once again, back to square one, they're getting pushed around by these quality offensive lines. And right now, you got to ask yourself, are the Cowboys going to do something? Are they going to gamble at some point in the season? Now, that could be in the shape of a trade. It could be in the shape of maybe making a coaching change. And again, man, that's what we're going to ask ourselves today. But before we get into the pros and cons, because that's how we're going to do this, we're going to look into the pros and we're going to look into the cons of firing Mike McCarthy. Before we do that, though, let me ask you this in the comments. Do you think the Cowboys should make this gamble or firing Mike McCarthy? Yes or not? Let me know in the comments. I want to read what you guys have to say. And while you do that, speaking of gambling, let me talk to you about our friends over at Texas Card House. Because if you like poker, man, Texas Card House is the way to do it. You can join the premier poker experience at Texas Card House, where the thrill of the game meets the excitement of the community. And if you've been playing poker, you know how important it is to play with a quality community. That's what you'll find at Texas Card House in any of their 6 Texas locations, highlighting the Dallas and Las Colinas venues. Texas Card House offers a unique blend of luxury, sophistication, and camaraderie for poker aficionados. Whether you are a seasoned pro or just starting out, join a welcoming community at a top-notch facility located near you. And between you and me, go on Tuesdays because it's $2 Tuesday. You get draft beers for $2, or you can check out Low Ball Happy Hour every day from 2 to 7 p.m. You know it, Texas Card House. The link is in the description if you want to check them out. So should the Cowboys gamble and fire Mike McCarthy? Let's talk about it, man. Here are the pros. I want to start with the pros right now as we try to figure this one out because it's a tricky one. Obviously, the top thing is you're shaking things up. And the way that things are going in Dallas, that could be a very positive. Now, there's several ways that you shake things up. Number one, you could look at things and be like, okay, the offensive scheme might change, right, with McCarthy out of the picture. The question for me, though, is how much would it really change? Because who would be running the offense? You would assume that it would be Brian Schottenheimer, and I'm not sure that is particularly promising. A lot of times, firing a head coach works in the NFL when you have like this rising coordinator behind him that is going to take over either the offense or the defense, right? Or if it's just a straight up culture problem, which I kind of struggle to think that the Cowboys have a scenario where a interim head coach would change things through culture. I'm not saying the Cowboys don't have a culture problem. They absolutely do in several ways. You don't have a physical team. That has to do with culture. You have a team that every game that they lose, they're talking about the details and kind of maybe suggesting that, the game plans are not that detailed or the players are not detailed in their assignments. That is a culture problem. You look at the tape and you look at some guys not being on the same page, but also on defense, just a lack of discipline, players not filling their gaps, players not doing their jobs, maybe because they're trying to be Superman, as Micah Parsons talked to us about a few weeks ago, or maybe just because they don't know what they're doing. All of that is a problem culture-wise, but I think there's not someone in the staff that would really change that in the middle of the season. So that part is tricky, but it would shake things up. Now, it would shake things up maybe within the locker room. I'm going to say this. This would be particularly important, I think, further into the season. If the Cowboys lose to the Niners, and maybe then to the Falcons, and maybe then to the Eagles, and suddenly you're sitting there at 3-6, and the schedule isn't getting any easier, then you might be thinking, okay, maybe the locker room needs something to raise morale, something to change, and maybe that is through making a move at head coach. I think you would get better game management. Yes, I do think that because a lot of the times I think the Cowboys have some time management issues under McCarthy. He doesn't, he now calls the plays before he didn't, but even when he didn't, it seemed like game management was an issue for Dallas. I think that's an area where the Cowboys could very realistically improve, and that doesn't only go for the game clock, it also goes for being on 3rd and 19, down 27-3 at the end of the first half and playing for the field goal instead of playing for a touchdown, which is what happened versus the Lions on Sunday. One of the biggest head scratchers for me personally, where you're like, why are we playing for a field goal? The game is lost. Can you find a way to climb out of that hell? And to do that, maybe playing for a touchdown and maybe being a little bit more aggressive would have been the way to go for me. I know that's been a controversial sequence in the game, however, so maybe I am in the wrong there. But I do think Cowboys game management would improve. I think really that's what it comes down to, pros-wise. Maybe you shake things up and maybe the result is positive. Maybe you get a different offensive scheme, and that is limited because you're in the middle of the season, so it's not like you can change things entirely, but maybe you can go about things differently. Maybe you can find ways to spice things up in the run game, for example. But once again, man, are we betting on Brian Schottenheimer to do that? Because that seems like it's already Brian Schottenheimer's job, though. So I do struggle with believing and buying into the idea that firing McCarthy will make the offense right. Which leads me to the cons. Honestly, it all starts with who the heck is taking over the team. Because, man, if the Jaguars fire Doug Peterson, they're 1-5. Their season is basically done. The Cowboys, however, are 3-3, And they're one game behind the NFC East leadership, which is the Commanders at 4-2. And I'm not sure if the Eagles are 4-2 as well. But it's not like you're out of things right now. Who are you getting in at assistant head coach? Because I've got 3 options written down here. It's not going to be shoddy, so we can forget about that. It could be Mike Zimmer. I think Mike Zimmer has a lot on his plate right now, however. He's trying to fix the defense, and it's not going great for him. So to make him the head coach would be a little bit funny to me. You could talk about John Fassel, special teams coordinator. This is a route Cowboys, NFL teams take commonly because that way you don't mess with the offense. That way you don't mess with the defense play caller. You just have someone on special teams coach the team. And they're usually well-liked by players. In the case of John Fassel, that is the case as well. Speaking of guys that are well-liked by players, maybe you could go with Al Harris. He is the assistant head coach after all. I think players could buy into that, but I'm also not sure how that changes anything for the offense. I'm not sure how that changes anything for the defense. And it would be a little bit funny to have an assistant head coach that is under Mike Zimmer suddenly be over Mike Zimmer, but not really over his side of the ball, because Harris basically coaches defensive backs, but it's not like he's play calling on defense or anything like that. So even that would be a little bit funny to me. I just don't think that the Cowboys have someone on the coaching staff that I would be in love with in terms of replacing McCarthy with one of these guys. I think that's one of the biggest things that is going to keep Mike McCarthy safe until the end of the season. Because as I said earlier, we're talking about should they. I don't think they will, but I'm just going over the pros and cons. Now, ultimately, man, I do ask myself, does firing Mike McCarthy in the middle of the season, because if we're talking about what will happen in 2025, that's a whole different conversation. Because then you can talk about guys like Ben Johnson. You can talk about guys like Bobby Slowick. You can talk about some of these hot name coaching candidates that you might end up landing. But does it fix the problem in the middle of the season? And I'm going to tell you what the problem is largely. We complained about the Cowboys not improving the defensive line, and it's becoming an issue. We complained about the Cowboys not keeping Tyron Smith around, instead trusting a first-round rookie who was considered a raw prospect to hit the ground running in week 1. That's been a problem. We complained about the lack of depth at cornerback. That's been a problem when you get a practice squad guy out there facing the likes of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams and a talented, high-powered offense. Andrew Booth, the same. You've talked about all that, and it all has come back to bite you. And I think no coach on the current coaching staff really changes any of that. Maybe the Cowboys are right now not good enough in terms of talent. The challenge for the Cowboys is, do they make a trade to improve the talent? Or do the Cowboys coaching staff magically make the necessary tweaks in the bye week to have a whole different product on the field? Last year, it just so happened that after the bye week, Mike McCarthy did approach offense very differently, and things improved drastically. They were doing things a certain way before the bye week, was not working out. After the bye week, it started working out. But it's not like Mike McCarthy is saving things. It's not like he's holding back. I think right now that is going to be much tougher to do because you might not have the kind of offensive line that you need to do that. You might not have the weapons on offense to do that. And quite honestly, he might just not be updated enough in terms of how he's running his offense to do that. Maybe it was really just a hot streak in 2023 where the change-ups really worked out for the Cowboys temporarily, and it didn't in the playoffs, by the way. It did not work in the playoffs. Right now, it's tough to find those silver linings for the Dallas Cowboys, but we'll see what they have in store for us after the bye week. For now, though, Mike McCarthy is still the head coach of the Cowboys, and if I had to bet, I would assume that's going to be the case even after week 18. We'll see how that goes, however. Hit the like button for me if you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Let me know in the comments what do you make out of this whole thing, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.